I thought I knew every path between silence and desire. Back then, my world was defined by school walls, the home routine, and a few safe havens where I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. At least not to myself. My name is Marcus, I'm 17, and I'm a senior in Albany, New York. I grew up living in the in-between, the son of divorced parents, raised by a mom who was always tired but determined to give me stability. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button for more stories like this. My shyness masked an intense sensitivity. I breathe numbers, but I survive on small breaks. The silent hours in my room, the morning walks to school, the quiet contemplation of the sky late in the afternoon. Among everyone, there was only one constant presence that made me forget my loneliness. Adrian. It was as if he unintentionally turned on the lights in all the dark corners I kept inside me. He was the person I trusted with things I didn't even have the courage to say out loud. For 4 years, I was the keeper of a secret. The love I felt for Adrian was different. A mix of deep respect, contained desire, and a visceral fear of losing what only he gave me. A sense of belonging. Guarding that feeling was exhausting, but the simple idea of losing our friendship always made fear win out over hope. If you've ever had to hide something that burned inside you, you'll understand everything that happened. Leave a like and subscribe because, honestly, what I went through in those mountains didn't feel real. What you hear here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. The sharp scent of pine always brought me peace. The Adirondack Mountains were part of my oldest memories with Adrian. It was a tradition. One weekend a month set aside just for us. Every detail was almost a ritual. In the cold morning, the damp breeze came full of promises, and when I closed my eyes, everything was silent, except for the crunch of our boots on the gravel and the faint rustle of leaves. Our routine started on Friday night. In my small room, we'd review maps, check provisions, and adjust gear. Adrian, always overly excited, would toss his backpack on the floor and make jokes about my excessive caution. I liked that. Our conversations ranged from plans for the future to scattered talks about parents, teachers, music, and nonsense. With him, time seemed to dissolve. The climb started early. Adrian was always the first to take a step, fearless, with that confidence flowing in a smile that always reached me. My place was right behind, keeping a distance, but watching the way he dodged roots, how he grumbled about loose rocks, and how much fun he had with my exaggerated concern as I adjusted the compass. During our breaks, we'd sit on cold rocks and share cereal bars and water, often in silence, but a comfortable silence, filled with glances and small gestures that made me feel seen. The sound of the forest was an unexpected relief. Thin curtains of wind breaking the monotony and a smell of damp earth that filled every empty space. The routine solidified the bond we had. In those moments, I was just another teenager trying to understand his own limits, while trying at least to enjoy every breath near Adrian, as if our moments together were my only chance to experience what freedom was. Our next destination was ambitious. A new stretch of Mount Marcy, 2 days away from everything and everyone, with an overnight stay at a hiker's shelter. I suggested the route cautiously, pretending it was just about seeking new challenges, even though I knew that for me, it was the possibility of having Adrian closer, for longer and far from the world that labeled us at every turn. The night before we left, Adrian showed up early, backpack slung over his shoulder and a sparkle in his eyes. "Ready to escape everything?" he said, messing up my hair the way only he did, loose and carefree. His ease at invading my space, and at the same time making me feel safe there, always surprised me. My mom's farewell was hurried. A simple, "Be careful," and we were on the road, just the two of us. The freedom almost tangible. The sky was clear, the radio was loud, and between laughs and teasing, the anticipation of the unknown spread like electricity between us. Adrian was the opposite of me in almost everything. Where I was methodical, he improvised. While I was reserved, he turned any silence into an invitation to laughter. His messy hair and open jacket made it clear that his relationship with the world was one of simplicity and courage. Still, we had something in common. There, in that car, we belonged to the same universe. I shared my best and worst with him. No masks. During the trip, small differences would emerge. I'd hesitate at stops, checking maps and plans, while Adrian focused on rap beats and the more mundane details of the scenery, pointing out clouds, shapes of trees, and making jokes with passing truck drivers. But we also discovered affinities. like our love for the unknown and the almost childlike pleasure of exploring together. When we reached the trailhead, the golden afternoon light filtered through the canopy, and Adrian made me promise that no matter what happened, the adventure there would be just ours. And it was with that silent promise that I followed, not knowing how much each step would change everything I had been holding in until then. The first part of the trail was filled with laughter and little provocations. Adrian, always a step ahead, would try to scare me by imitating wild animal sounds. When I tripped on a branch, he pretended to be overly dramatic. "Marcus, we're lost. Maximum survival, I'm going to have to eat worms." I laughed, even as my cheeks burned from embarrassment, and from the pleasure of seeing him so light, so carefree. At lunchtime, we found a log by a stream. He threw his backpack down, grumbling about being hungry, and improvised a rustic sandwich, handing me half. As we ate, he talked about his fear of the future. He didn't know what career to pursue, didn't want to disappoint his parents, but at the same time dreamed of the unpredictable. I confided in him that I also had doubts. My controlling nature prevented me from accepting chance. Adrian listened, resting his face in his hands, his eyes attentive. "If the world ends tomorrow, at least we know we came all the way out here, right?" he said, giving me that lopsided smile. I laughed in response, but inside, I was memorizing every word, every shred of truth in the subtext of that conversation. In the afternoon, we faced a steeper section. He offered a hand on a slippery rock, holding mine firmly. The touch was quick but automatic, genuine, as if he had done it 1,000 times before, and somehow each time was new to me. We walked side by side after that, experiencing the tranquility of synchronized steps. As sunset neared, we set up camp together. I messed up the order of the tent poles, getting tangled in the stakes, and Adrian didn't waste time joking about the situation, but soon came to help for real. We worked as a team, not talking much, guided only by gestures and muffled laughs. When we finished, we stood side by side, contemplating the sky as it slowly darkened. In those moments, I felt that, even in silence, the feeling of belonging was greater than any words. Night fell slowly, with the smell of burning wood and the wind bringing the cold. I prepared dinner while Adrian got water. We shared the food, a flashlight illuminating our faces, and muffled squeals as we felt the night cold. Between bites and confessions, the connection seemed to deepen, as if every difficulty we faced together gave us more confidence to move forward. Even without talking about our feelings, we were growing there. The warmth of the fire was a relief, but it couldn't keep my restlessness away. On the other side of the fire, Adrian was messing with stones, drawing circles on the dirt with a branch. I watched the way he furrowed his brow, lost in thought, the way each shadow carved his face as if revealing what was behind his fearless pose. Inside, I felt the weight of the secret that had been with me forever. I wanted to talk. So many times I had imagined this scene, a crackling fire, scattered stars, and a confession tumbling out of my mouth. But the fear of scaring him away, of losing that one safe place in the world, kept me silent, and it exhausted me. Every time Adrian gave me a worried look when I zoned out, I felt like screaming, but I could only smile, pretending everything was normal. Adrian also seemed less expansive. He tried to hide it, but I noticed his discomfort when I mentioned a guy from our school dating another guy. He looked away, fiddling with stones, until he changed the subject. Later, during a break, he scraped his ankle on a rock. When I offered my hand to help him up, he held on tight, maybe for a second longer than necessary. The touch lingered there, hovering between us, turning the silence into a minefield of doubts and expectations. In addition to our internal issues, a practical obstacle showed its hand. During the night, the wind picked up and we heard cracking sounds nearby. At dawn, we discovered that part of the trail back was blocked by thick branches and tree fragments. Adrian laughed. "If we have to, we'll find another way." But there was tension in his voice. We knew we'd have to improvise, an unexpected test of our limits, and of the patience we had with each other. In the midst of the difficulties, between calculations and new route plans, I found myself wishing that the unforeseen event would give us more time together. It was selfish, but maybe, in those labyrinths of uncertainty created by the forest and our emotions, we could finally get lost, to truly find ourselves. The new path was even wilder, lined with moss-covered rocks and trees that seemed like silent guards of our secret. Making up time became our priority, but at the same time, the uncertainty made every minute we had together stretch out as if the forest was extending its protection over us, isolating everything that still had no name from the rest of the world. When we found the hiker's shelter, the feeling was one of both conquest and surrender. A wooden refuge, smelling of resin, old and solid, stuck in a clearing in the middle of the woods. Inside, everything was small. A tiny space, muffled sounds of leaves outside, two makeshift mattresses so close they almost formed a single surface. Late afternoon was falling slowly, painting the rustic walls orange. Adrian took off his sweat-soaked shirt before collapsing on the mattress, his chest heaving from the effort. I watched every nuance of that gesture. The sun's reflection on his skin, the trace of veins on his forearm, the small scars from other adventures. I was taking it all in silently, not knowing if it was even allowed to admire so much. I lay down beside him, an invisible wall of expectation between us. We just listened to the wind. For a while, there were only our breaths, his, deep and rhythmic, mine, hesitant and ragged. Adrian looked at me with a sweet weariness of someone who trusted that moment completely. Outside, birds exchanged disjointed notes, almost as if they were watching too. I broke the ice with a silly comment about how he had perfectly imitated the sound of a crow the day before. Adrian threw his head back and laughed loudly, the sound echoing in the small shelter. It was one of those laughs that pull you in, that suck up all the tension, and in the relaxation of his facial muscles, I saw a boy at peace. He was the first one to move closer. He turned on his side, his face a few inches from mine, his golden eyes reflecting the late afternoon light, and held out his hand as if offering, not demanding. He touched my hair, endearingly messed up, and let his fingers follow an imaginary line to my ear. I didn't have to move. I just let it happen, feeling the light touch. Almost a question. Can I go further? The tension changed quality. It was no longer uncomfortable and became a promise. The smell of his skin mixed with the wood, the heat rising on the back of my neck and the hairs on my arm, the happy discomfort of someone who had never been so close to crossing a boundary. We exchanged long, drawn-out looks that, for most of our lives, had only lasted seconds, but in that moment seemed like entire hours. The desire was huge, but stronger was the apprehension, the old fear that had always kept my mouth from confessing. I couldn't help it and whispered, "You feel this too, don't you?" Adrian didn't answer for a few seconds. The moment suspended in time, my courage dependent on that silent yes. He gave me a grateful look with his eyes, let out a slow breath, and confessed, "I don't understand everything that's happening here, but if I'm going to get lost, I want it to be with you." The confession carried all doubt away, leaving only the confirmed fact. There, it didn't matter what our names were, our pasts, or who we were supposed to be outside that clearing. We were just two boys, tired of pretending that the burning in our chests was just our imagination. Our bodies, then, rested side by side, with no barriers, and that, more than any words, forever transformed the story we told ourselves. The silence before the storm of emotions was absolute inside. Everything seemed more intense. The golden light fading on our skin, the mixed smells of sweat, wood, and forest, the slight shiver caused by the soft touch of his fingers moving up the side of my face. I felt, in that instant, that the world had shrunk to the shelter, to the narrow space between our bodies. Adrian moved closer until our noses touched, his warm breath cutting through the almost imperceptible cold of the late day. Our eyes closed at the same time, as if we had already rehearsed it in our minds. The kiss, when it came, was more of a declaration than an impulse. It was tentative, subtle, as wide as the universe, but as delicate as a secret. My lips sought his with a careful eagerness, the fear of doing it wrong still hovering, but melting away with every movement of acceptance. There was urgency, but it was interwoven with respect. Nothing was aggressive. It was like we were navigating the banks of an unknown river, testing the temperature of the water before really diving in. His hands moved to my neck, the curve of my shoulder, going down slowly and surely until they found mine, intertwining our fingers in a silent prayer. His body was a new territory that I wanted to learn slowly, savoring every inch, with my eyes closed and my senses open. The heat that formed there seemed incompatible with the cold already coming through the cracks in the walls. Our bodies together created a trench against all the fear of the outside world. I felt his heart pulsing on the tips of his fingers as he kept his hand on my chest. His touch was measured, calm, but every curve he discovered made something grow inside me that was impossible to translate into simple words. I entrusted myself to him completely, responding to every gesture, every approach, allowing intimacy to be built slowly, almost like a craft. Our kisses became deeper, longer, alternating with pauses full of long looks, shy smiles, and ragged sighs. His legs between mine created a fortress of safety, my chest aching from that mix of desire and tenderness, as if I were jumping off a cliff knowing he was waiting for me at the bottom. We explored boundaries that were still unspoken, let our bodies recognize each other as promises kept. He pulled me closer, pressing our chests together, feeling that no one was judging here, no one was interrupting. The warmth of his embrace was different from anything I had ever experienced. It was enough to scare away the doubt that this was my place, in that instant, with him. I stifled a nervous laugh when our legs got tangled, tripping over our own instincts. He smiled against my skin, teasing and calming me at the same time. It was as if every movement was a dance just for us, though there was no music besides our ragged breaths. The pulsing of my desire and my tenderness mixed, creating a memory that was impossible to forget. Our skin thinning the distance, our hands moving along courageous paths, our words replaced by anxious sighs. When we reached the peak of closeness, it was like turning on soft lights in rooms of my inner house that had never seen light before. There was no shame, just expansion, relief, the certainty that all of this, as improbable as it was exactly where it should be. Our bodies met in an intuitive choreography, where nothing was planned, everything was discovery. I felt the same nervousness in him, disguised by the measured rhythm of someone who wants to prolong every second to save it like a treasure. I exchanged sweet words between kisses and light bites, held his face, and repeated to myself that it was real, that we were finally in sync. After long minutes, our breaths aligned again, our eyes met, our sweaty hands still intertwined. We stayed there, quiet, listening only to our hearts and the sound of the wind pushing leaves outside. I knew in that instant that I would never see the world the same way again. The space between us stopped being something to be filled and became a place of rest. I just wanted to stay there, stuck to him, feeling the warmth of his skin and the lightness of acceptance. Adrian looked at me in a new way, as if he were seeing all of me for the first time. It was impossible to know if it was surrender, relief, or a mix of both. I slid my fingers slowly through his hair, wanting to prolong that peace as much as possible. The words took a long time to come. The silence between us was different now, comfortable, safe. I knew everything had changed, even if we didn't say anything. Adrian was the first to try and name the feeling. This didn't have to be so complicated, did it? He smiled, almost apologizing for his own discomfort. I shook my head, a lump in my throat. For me, just the fact that it's happening changes everything. That raw vulnerability cleared any doubt. We laughed nervously, but also with relief. I felt as if all the years of secrets, all the silence and fear had been transformed into something beautiful, something that deserved to be celebrated, not hidden. For the first time, I looked at him without trying to hide, to control, to pretend. I saw a friend, a confidant, but also someone who now belonged to a new place inside my chest. We talked in low voices, as if the words could scare the moment away. He told me that since the beginning of the trail he had been feeling something strange, different, but always attributed it to adrenaline. He admitted that he didn't quite understand what it meant for the future, if there would be consequences outside that clearing. But he wanted to accept it. For the first time, I said out loud how difficult it had been to hide for so many years, how I thought I'd never have the courage. But being there, the way I was, made it all worth it. At the end of that night, or when the night seemed ready to turn into dawn, we closed the cycle. Adrian intertwined our fingers, as if to say, "It's going to be okay." We lay there, looking at the shelter's ceiling, trying to hear the future in the leaves outside. I felt hope, a kind of hope I didn't know, full of fear and longing. In the morning, as the sun began to cast shadows between the trees and some bird song announced that the world outside was still going on, we no longer needed words. His look, as he rummaged in his backpack and arranged my things on the way, made it clear. Something had changed. It was obvious in the longer touches, in the smiles that now came before the embarrassment. Every small gesture was a reminder of what we had lived through, and the new doors that had opened. In the end, I realized that the shelter in the mountains wasn't just to protect us from the wind, but for us to finally allow ourselves to be who we truly were. We had broken down invisible walls, crossing fear to discover that deep down, what existed between us was undeniable. For the first time in a long time, I went to sleep kneeling on the podium of courage. Not for having conquered someone, but for having allowed myself to be truly seen. The trail back seemed different. The branches, the leaves, the smell of wet earth, everything took on a different color as we descended in a shared silence, knowing that somehow, all our next trails would never be the same. The descent from the mountain happened at a different pace than anything we had ever experienced together. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't slow. It was a new rhythm, as if our steps had learned their own language during the night in the shelter. Adrian now walked beside me, no longer ahead as he always had. We shared the same tempo, the same care in choosing where to step, the same pause to look at the landscape. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, creating golden spots of light on the path ahead of us. Every ray that touched our faces seemed like a silent blessing, as if nature itself was celebrating what we had discovered. Adrian stopped at a bend in the trail, turned to me and said, "You know I can't imagine these weekends without you anymore, right?" His voice carried a new seriousness, a weight that didn't exist before. I smiled, feeling my chest tighten in a good way. "Me neither," I replied, and for the first time, I didn't have to hide what those words really meant. We continued walking, our fingers brushing occasionally, small touches that served as constant reminders that everything had changed. When we reached the lookout that marked the halfway point back, Adrian suggested we stop. The view stretched for miles, mountains overlapping in shades of green and blue until they disappeared on the horizon. "Look at this," he murmured. But when I turned, I realized he was looking at me, not the scenery. I felt my cheeks get hot, but I didn't look away. It was as if we were learning a new way of seeing each other. "I want to take a picture here," Adrian said, pulling his phone out of his pocket. To remember. He didn't have to explain what he meant. We positioned ourselves on the natural stone ledge, our shoulders touching. When he stretched out his arm to frame the selfie, our faces were too close to be just casual. The click captured more than two people on a trail. It recorded the exact moment when everything transformed. We looked at the photo on the small screen. Our smiles were genuine, relaxed, and there was something in our eyes that I had only ever seen when I was alone in my room, imagining impossible scenarios. "Perfect," Adrian whispered, saving the image. "Let's come back here every year. Promise?" The question carried the weight of a much bigger promise. "I promise," I replied without hesitation. I knew he wasn't just talking about the physical place, but about preserving what we had built, about not letting the world down below destroy the honesty we found up here. The rest of the descent was punctuated by conversations about the near future. Adrian talked about how he couldn't explain to himself what had happened, but that he was sure he didn't want it to be just an isolated experience. "I don't know what it's going to be like when we go back to school on Monday," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to pretend that nothing has changed." I agreed, even feeling a chill in my stomach at the thought of the challenges that awaited us. Our friends, our families, the school routine. Everything seemed to have the potential to complicate the simplicity of what we experienced on the mountain. But Adrian held my hand when I expressed that concern, a gesture so natural that I almost forgot it was the first time we had done it in broad daylight. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "Our way, in our own time." It was a proposal, a silent pact that we would face the uncertainties side by side. I accepted by squeezing his hand back, sealing an agreement that transcended words. When we spotted the parking lot at the end of the trail, a strange melancholy came over me. It was as if we were leaving an enchanted world to return to raw reality. Adrian must have felt something similar, because he slowed his pace, clearly reluctant to rush our return to civilization. "Hey," he said, making me stop completely. "No matter what happens, no matter how people react or what we discover about ourselves, I want you to know that these were the best days of my life." His words echoed among the trees, and I felt that they were being etched not just in my memory, but in the very atmosphere of the place. We hugged there at the end of the trail, a hug that lasted just long enough for us to both prepare for what was to come. When we separated, there was determination in our eyes. It wasn't an end, it was a beginning. Now, months later, when I look at that photo on my phone, I can still smell the pine and feel the warmth of the sun that morning. Adrian is next to me in bed, sleeping, and I can watch his relaxed face without hiding, without pretending I'm looking at something else. That's the biggest change of all, the freedom to just be. Going back to school on Monday was smoother than we had imagined. We didn't shout to the world what had happened, but we also didn't hide the new closeness between us. Some classmates noticed that we were walking hand in the hallways, that we sat closer in the cafeteria, that our looks lasted a few seconds longer. but we discovered that most people were too busy with their own lives to turn our story into a scandal. Of course, there were challenges. My mom took a while to understand, and Adrian's parents needed some difficult conversations before they accepted it. Some friends drifted away, but others came closer, admiring our courage. I learned that authenticity works like a natural filter. It pushes away those who shouldn't be close, and brings closer those who really matter. Adrian is on a journey of self-discovery that is still happening. He tells me about his doubts, his moments of confusion about his identity, but also about the growing certainty that the feelings he has for me are real and deserve to be explored. We are learning together that we don't need to have all the answers to live our truth. We go back to that lookout in the Adirondacks every month. It has become our tradition, a ritual of reconnection with the place where everything began. Every time we climb that trail, we discover something new about ourselves and about what we're building together. The last photo we took there shows two more confident kids, with wider smiles and eyes that no longer carry the weight of a secret. What I learned in those days was that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting in spite of it. For 4 years, I let the fear of losing our friendship stop me from discovering that we could have something even deeper. What almost cost me was the chance to live my truth and to allow Adrian to explore his own internal barriers. The experience taught me that authenticity is a gift we give not only to ourselves, but to the people we love. When I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't, I created a space for Adrian to also question his own internal barriers. Our mutual honesty created a safe environment where we could both grow. Today, when I see other young people struggling with similar issues, I want to say that there is no right time or right way to discover yourself. Adrian is still exploring his sexuality. I'm still learning how to navigate relationships. And we're both figuring out how to be a couple in a world that doesn't always understand. But we do it together. And that makes all the difference. Our story isn't unique, but it's ours. Every person who watches this video probably has their own mountain to climb, their own secrets to reveal, their own versions of courage to find. What I can guarantee is that on the other side of fear, there is a version of you that is worth any risk. The trail continues. Adrian and I still have a lot to discover about ourselves, about our feelings, about how we want to build our future. Some weeks are easier, others test our patience and communication. But each challenge only strengthens the foundation we built in that mountain shelter. If this story touched you in any way, if you recognized your own struggles or hopes in what I shared, know that you are not alone. There are mountains waiting to be climbed, truths waiting to be revealed, and people who will love you exactly as you are. But first, you have to be brave enough to show who you really are. Leave a like if you believe in the power of authenticity. Subscribe to the channel to follow more real stories of personal discovery and growth, and hit the bell to not miss any episodes. In the comments, tell me, what was the moment in your life when you decided to stop hiding who you really are? Your experiences can inspire others to find their own courage. What you hear here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check out the link in the description right now. And remember, sometimes the greatest love of your life is closer than you think. Sometimes, it's just a matter of having enough courage to climb the mountain. See you on the next adventure, everyone. Thanks for being part of this journey with me.